The sound wasn't loud, but in the pressurized silence of a Boeing 777 cruising 7 miles above the Atlantic, it was absolute. It was the crack of a thunderclap in a library, a sound so sharp and so profoundly wrong it severed every conversation, ended every dream, and drew the eyes of 200 strangers to a single, impossible moment. A flight attendant, her uniform immaculate and her composure legendary, had just slapped a passenger. But this was no ordinary act of rage. This was the story of Chloe Sterling, a 10-year veteran of the skies, and the slap that should have ended her career. Instead, it would unravel a conspiracy, expose a broken system, and change the future of an entire airline, all because the woman whose face was now stinging with the imprint of her hand was someone she should have never, ever touched. Chloe Sterling believed that every flight was a small miracle of trust. Passengers trusted the pilots; they couldn't see the mechanics they'd never met, and the thin aluminum shell separating them from the void. And they trusted her. They trusted her to bring them a blanket, to calm their nerves, to know what to do if the world started to fall away beneath them. For 10 years with Apex Air, that trust was the fuel she ran on, more than the lukewarm coffee she chugged in galleys at 3 a.m. But lately, that trust felt thin, stretched, just like everything else at Apex. The day of Flight 828, from New York's JFK to London, Heathrow began like any other brutally early morning. The alarm at 4:00 a.m. felt less like a wake-up call and more like an assault. Chloe's small apartment in Queens was filled with the ghosts of a better life. On her fridge, a picture of her father, Robert Sterling, stood proudly in front of a brand-new engine turbine, his Apex Air Senior Engineer badge gleaming. He was the reason she'd fallen in love with aviation. He used to talk about the airline with a reverence usually reserved for cathedrals. "We're not just a company, Chloe," he'd say. "We're a legacy. We connect people. We have to be the best." Now Robert was in a long-term care facility, his brilliant mind clouded by a relentless neurological disease. The legacy he spoke of was being sold off piece by piece, and the bills for his care were a mountain Chloe was trying to climb with pebbles. The pre-flight briefing was tense. Apex Air was bleeding money. Rumors of another round of restructuring, a corporate euphemism for layoffs, circulated in hushed, anxious whispers. The coffee was stale, the complimentary pastries were gone. Cost-saving measures, their base manager had chirped, and the crew's smiles were as brittle as old plastic. Her lead flight attendant for this flight was David, a kind, weary man whose 25 years of service were etched into the lines around his eyes. Another full flight, another skeleton crew. David sighed, looking over the passenger manifest. "They're running us into the ground, Chloe." "Tell me something I don't know," she replied, pinning her name badge, Chloe, onto her crisp navy blue blazer. The blazer was a newer, cheaper model. The fabric felt flimsy, a poor imitation of the quality they used to have, a symbol of everything that was wrong. Her phone buzzed, a text from the care facility. "Hi, Chloe. Your father had a difficult night. He was asking for you. Also a friendly reminder that this month's payment is due on the 20th. She felt a familiar tightening in her chest. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and forced the practiced, serene mask of a flight attendant into place. For the next 8 hours, her problems didn't exist. She was Chloe, the calm professional, the person you could trust. As passengers began to board, the chaos started. The cabin was a flurry of oversized bags, confused seating arrangements, and the first hints of passenger entitlement. Chloe moved through it all with practiced grace, her voice a soothing balm on the frayed nerves of travel. "Yes, sir. Your bag can go here." "Ma'am, let me help you with that." "Welcome aboard Apex Air." That's when she first saw the woman in seat 34B. She was unremarkable, almost deliberately so. She wore a drab grey pantsuit that looked a size too big and ill-fitting glasses that magnified her sharp, critical eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was one of perpetual disapproval. The manifest listed her as Peterson Ann. The first interaction was minor. Miss Peterson was trying to shove an old, battered leather briefcase under the seat in front of her. It was clearly too large. "Ma'am, I'm afraid that bag won't fit," Chloe said politely. "I'll be happy to place it in an overhead bin for you." Ms. Peterson looked up, her gaze dismissive. "It will fit. It always fits." She gave the bag a violent shove. "The FAA regulations are quite clear on storage for takeoff and landing." Chloe persisted, her smile unwavering. "It's a safety issue. We need to keep the area clear." The woman sighed, a gust of pure theatrical exasperation. "Fine. Do your little job." She practically threw the briefcase at Chloe, who caught it without flinching and stored it overhead. As she walked away, she heard the woman mutter to her seatmate, "Amazing what they let work on these planes now. No common sense." Chloe let it slide. You had to. It was part of the job. You absorbed the small aggressions, the frustrations, the rudeness, and you metabolized it into politeness. You were a shock absorber for humanity's travel anxieties. But the shocks kept coming, all from 34B. During the beverage service, Ms. Peterson demanded a specific brand of sparkling water Apex hadn't stocked in years. When Chloe politely offered the standard option, the woman scoffed. "Cutting corners, I see. Typical." Later, she complained her headphones weren't working. David went to check them himself, only to find she hadn't plugged them in correctly. There was no apology, just a disdainful snatching of the device. She complained that her seat didn't recline enough, that the air from the vent was too cold, that the reading light flickered. Each complaint was delivered with a tone that suggested it was a personal failure on Chloe's part. Chloe handled each one with textbook professionalism, but with every interaction, she felt a little piece of her composure chip away. David noticed. "Don't let her get to you," he murmured to her in the galley. "She's just one of those, a professional misery monger. Gets a thrill out of it." "I know," Chloe said, rubbing her temples. "It's just one of those days." One of those days where the text from the care home felt like a lead weight in her pocket. One of those days where her father's smiling face on the fridge felt like a photograph from a different, happier world. One of those days where the flimsy fabric of her uniform felt like a costume for a part she was no longer sure she could play. And the flight was only just beginning. The cabin lights were dimmed. The Atlantic slid by below a vast black mirror, reflecting nothing. Most passengers were asleep or lost in the blue glow of their screens. It was the quiet mid-flight lull that crews both cherished and dreaded, a time for rest, but also a time when exhaustion truly set in. Chloe was doing a quiet walk-through of the economy cabin, her footsteps silent on the carpeted aisle, when a call button chimed. Seat 15C. She arrived to find a man, probably in his late 60s, pale and sweating profusely. His wife beside him had a hand on his arm, her face a mask of fear. I think my husband is having a problem," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "He's having chest pains." Chloe's training instantly took over. The fatigue, the stress, the memory of the woman in 34B, it all vanished, replaced by a focused, crystalline calm. "Okay," she said, her voice low and steady, projecting an authority that immediately soothed the wife. "My name is Chloe. We're going to take care of him." She knelt in the aisle. "Sir, can you tell me what you're feeling?" "It's a pressure," the man wheezed, clutching his chest. "Like an elephant is sitting on me. And my left arm feels numb." The classic signs. Her mind raced through the protocols. She alerted David and the cockpit immediately. The captain's voice, calm and professional, crackled through the interphone. They would consult with Medlink, the ground-based medical support service. Meanwhile, the crew was in charge. David page for a doctor on board and get the defibrillator and the medical kit. Now, Chloe commanded, her voice firm. David, seeing her complete control, didn't hesitate. The announcement was made a calm request for any medical professionals to identify themselves. As luck would have it, a cardiologist was on board, returning from a conference. He came forward, a rumpled, sleepy-looking man who became all business the moment he saw the patient. For the next 30 minutes, the small space around seat 15C became an impromptu emergency room. Chloe was the doctor's right hand. She relayed vitals to the cockpit, who passed them to Medlink. She prepped the defibrillator pads just in case. She administered oxygen from the portable tank, her movements efficient and sure. She was a whirlwind of competence. Through it all, she never lost her human touch. She kept a reassuring hand on the wife's shoulder, explaining what was happening in simple terms. The doctor is giving him aspirin to thin his blood. We're monitoring his heart. The captain is already looking at diversion options. We are doing everything possible. From her seat in row 34, Ann Peterson watched the entire scene unfold. She wasn't watching with concern for the sick passenger. She was watching Chloe. Her critical eyes, magnified by her glasses, missed nothing. Chloe's confidence, her seamless coordination with the doctor and the rest of the crew, the way she commanded the situation without causing a panic. It was a masterclass in crisis management. She saw a level of skill and dedication that was frankly astonishing. The crisis passed its peak. The doctor, with the help of the onboard medical kit and Medlink's advice, stabilized the man. He was still in serious condition, but the immediate danger had subsided. The captain, having consulted with Medlink, decided to continue to Heathrow, which was now closer than any suitable diversion airport with the required medical facilities. When it was over, Chloe gently helped the wife, and they moved the patient to lie across an empty row of seats in the back, where she and the doctor could better monitor him for the remainder of the flight. Finally, Chloe returned to the galley, the adrenaline leaving her system in a rush, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. David was there, pouring her a bottle of water. "You were incredible, Chloe," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "Seriously. Best I've ever seen anyone handle a situation like that." "Just did my job," she said, leaning against the counter. Her hands were trembling slightly. She tried to steady them by gripping the water bottle. "No," David said, shaking his head. "That wasn't just the job. That was something else. Your dad would have been proud." The mention of her father was a gut punch. It brought everything rushing back. The bills, the fear, the crushing weight of her life on the ground. She felt a tear prick the corner of her eye and angrily wiped it away. She couldn't break. Not here. She needed a moment. She decided to do one last trash collection run before the pre-landing preparations began. It was a mindless routine task that would hopefully help her recenter. She worked her way up the aisle, the plastic bag crinkling softly. Then she reached row 34. Ms. Peterson was awake, her reading light on. She held out a small, empty plastic cup. Chloe reached to take it, but the woman didn't let go. Her sharp eyes locked onto Chloe's. "Quite the little hero, aren't we?" Ms. Peterson said, her voice dripping with a strange, condescending sweetness. Chloe was taken aback. "Excuse me, the drama back there." "Very impressive performance," the woman continued, still holding the cup. "It's a shame all that competence is wasted on a job like this." The comment was so unexpected, so needlessly cruel, that Chloe felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "This is a good job," Chloe said, her voice tight. "We save lives." Miss Peterson finally released the cup, dropping it into Chloe's bag. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper that felt more venomous than a shout. "Please, you serve coffee and fluff pillows. That man was lucky a real doctor was on board. You're just a glorified waitress in the sky. All this dedication, this seriousness, for what a meager paycheck and a pension that will probably be gone by the time you retire. It's pathetic." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the very core of Chloe's identity, her pride, her years of service. But it was the next sentence that broke through every professional shield she had ever erected. "My daughter is a neurosurgeon," Ms. Peterson said with a smug little smile. "She makes a real difference in the world. She would never ever have to settle for a life like this." A life like this. In that moment, Chloe didn't just see a rude passenger. She saw every corporate executive who had cut their budget. She saw the dwindling pension funds. She saw the flimsy uniform and the stale coffee. She saw the mountain of medical bills for the brilliant engineer who was now trapped in his own mind. She saw her father's legacy being mocked, his pride in her profession being ground into the dirt by this callous, ignorant woman. The carefully constructed dam of her composure, already weakened by exhaustion and worry, didn't just crack. It exploded. The cabin was quiet. The trembling in her hands returned, but this time it wasn't from adrenaline. It was from a rage so pure and so white-hot it eclipsed everything else. Her training screamed at her to walk away. Her professionalism begged her to take a deep breath. Her 10 years of experience pleaded with her to turn the other cheek. But the part of her that was Robert Sterling's daughter, the part of her that was a scared, exhausted, and deeply wounded human being, took over. Her hand moved before she could even think. It wasn't a powerful Hollywood-style punch. It was a sharp, stinging, open-palmed slap. The sound crack was utterly alien in the humming drone of the aircraft. Time seemed to freeze. Ann Peterson's head snapped to the side, her smug smile replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. A red mark, the perfect outline of Chloe's fingers, began to bloom on her cheek. The passenger in the window seat gasped, his eyes wide. The man across the aisle dropped his tablet. Silence. A profound, echoing, career-ending silence. Chloe stood there, her arm still slightly extended, her hand tingling as if burned. The full weight of what she had just done crashed down on her. The rage vanished, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. She had just slapped a passenger at 35,000 tall feet. It was over. Her job, her future, her ability to pay for her father's care. All of it gone in the time it took to raise her hand. The silence in the cabin lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 3 or 4 seconds. In that frozen moment, Chloe's entire life seemed to flash before her eyes, not her past, but her future. A bleak, terrifying landscape of unemployment lines, eviction notices and calls from debt collectors. She saw the disappointed face of her father, not as he was now, but as he was in her memory, his belief in her shattered. The first to react was Ann Peterson. She didn't scream or shout. Her hand slowly went to her cheek, her fingers lightly touching the reddening skin. Her eyes, wide with shock, slowly focused on Chloe. The look in them wasn't anger, not yet. It was something else, a stunned, analytical disbelief, as if a complex equation had just yielded an impossible result. Then the spell broke. David was there, seemingly materializing out of thin air. He had seen the final moments of the confrontation from the galley. "Chloe," he said, his voice, a low, urgent whisper. He gently but firmly took her arm and pulled her back, stepping between her and the passenger. "Ma'am," David said, his voice, the epitome of professional calm, addressing Ms. Peterson. "I'm the lead flight attendant. Are you all right?" Ms. Peterson blinked as if coming out of a trance. Yes, I think so. Her voice was quiet, unsteady. I'm so sorry for what just happened. David said, his words carefully chosen. This is completely unacceptable. Please allow me to escort my colleague away, and I will return to speak with you. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned Chloe around and steered her towards the rear galley, his grip on her arm like a vice. The eyes of the passengers followed them, a silent wave of judgment and morbid curiosity. The moment the curtain to the galley swished shut, David let go of her arm. He looked at her, his face a mixture of pity and disbelief. Chloe, what did you do? He whispered, his voice cracking. In all my years, I've never... Chloe leaned back against the steel countertop, her legs feeling like they might give out. She couldn't speak. She just stared at her own hand, the one that had delivered the slap. It felt like it belonged to someone else. It was a foreign object, a weapon she hadn't known she was carrying. I don't know. She finally choked out the words, tasting like ash. She said things about my job, my life, about everything. I don't care if she threatened your life, Chloe. You can't put your hands on a passenger. You know this. David ran a hand through his thinning hair, his own composure starting to fray. They're going to have you arrested. They'll meet the plane at the gate. You'll be fired before your feet touch the tarmac. Your license will be revoked. God, Chloe. His words weren't accusations. They were a eulogy for her career, and she knew every word was true. She felt a strange, hollow calm settle over her. The worst had happened. There was no more suspense, no more dread about what might be. There was only the cold, hard reality of the fallout. David took a deep breath, reasserting his authority. Okay. Here's what happens now. You are relieved of your duties for the remainder of this flight. You will not enter the cabin again. You will sit on the jump seat back here, and you will not speak to anyone. I have to go deal with this. I have to report it to the captain. He looked at her one last time, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. I'm so sorry, Chloe. Then he was gone, parting the curtain to face the mess she had made. The last hour and a half of the flight was the longest of Chloe's life. She sat strapped into the hard, uncomfortable jump seat, staring at the galley wall. She could hear the muffled sounds of the cabin, David's voice, low and apologetic, speaking to the woman in 34B. The captain making an announcement about beginning their initial descent into Heathrow. The cheerful automated chime that signaled the seatbelt sign turning on. Every normal routine sound of a flight landing was a torment. It was a reminder of a world she was no longer a part of. She thought about the sick passenger, the man whose life she had helped save just an hour ago. The memory felt like it belonged to a different person. How could the hero of one moment become the villain of the next? She thought about her first training flight, the overwhelming sense of pride she felt as she put on the uniform. She had wanted to be the best for her father, for the legacy he believed in. And now she had disgraced that legacy in the most public and spectacular way possible. As the plane descended through the thick London clouds, she watched the grey, rain-slicked landscape of England appear. The wheels touched down with a gentle bump, a perfect landing that marked the end of her career. While the plane taxied to the gate, David came back into the galley. He avoided her eyes. The captain has been in contact with ground control and airline management. He said, his voice flat and official. There will be officials waiting to meet the aircraft. They have asked for you and for the passenger, Miss Peterson. He paused. She didn't want to make a fuss. She refused medical attention. She just wants to talk to the airline. That's something, I guess. Chloe just nodded. It didn't matter. The act itself was enough. When the jet bridge connected and the ding sounded, signaling the end of the flight, it felt like a death knell. David began the disembarking announcements, his voice betraying none of the drama that had transpired. Chloe remained on her jump seat. A man in a sharp suit with an Apex Air corporate pin on his lapel appeared at the galley curtain. He was flanked by 2 stoic members of airport security. "Miss Chloe Sterling," the man in the suit said. His tone was cold, impersonal. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Please come with me." She unbuckled herself and stood up, her legs stiff. As they escorted her through the now empty business class cabin towards the open door, she saw Ann Peterson being met by another even more severe-looking corporate type. The woman was standing there, her briefcase in hand, the red mark on her cheek, now a dull, angry-looking blemish. Their eyes met for a fleeting second across the cabin. There was no triumph in Ms. Peterson's gaze, no satisfaction, just that same unreadable analytical expression. Chloe had expected to be led to a police interrogation room. She had steeled herself for handcuffs, for charges being read, for the humiliating process of being booked. Instead, she was led through a series of anonymous service corridors, deep within the bowels of Heathrow, away from the public eye. They ended up in front of a polished mahogany door with a small brass plaque that read, "Apex Air, London Executive Suite." The man in the suit opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The room was a high-end corporate boardroom. A long, polished table reflected the cool, recessed lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the airfield, where planes with the familiar Apex tail fin were landing and taking off. Her plane, Flight 828, was visible at its gate, being serviced for its return journey. And at the head of the table, sitting in a plush leather chair, was Ann Peterson. Except it wasn't Ann Peterson anymore. She had taken off the frumpy grey jacket, revealing a perfectly tailored and obviously expensive silk blouse. The severe bun had been loosened, her hair now falling in a stylish, professional cut. The clunky glasses were gone, replaced by a pair of sleek, modern frames that highlighted the intelligence in her eyes. She was no longer a disgruntled middle-aged passenger. She radiated an aura of immense power and authority. Standing beside her was the man who had met her at the gate. Chloe and her escort stood there awkwardly. The silence stretched thick with tension. Finally, the woman spoke. Her voice was different, too. Gone was the whiny, condescending tone. It was now crisp clear and commanded absolute attention. "Thank you, Michael," she said to Chloe's escort. "You can wait outside." To the man beside her, she said, "Daniel, please get Ms. Sterling a water." The men left, closing the door softly behind them. Now it was just the 2 of them. Chloe stood frozen, her mind struggling to process the bizarre turn of events. The woman gestured to a chair opposite her at the vast table. "Please, Chloe, sit down." Chloe numbly did as she was told, perching on the edge of the chair. The woman folded her hands on the table. She looked directly at Chloe, her gaze intense and unwavering. "I imagine you're quite confused," she said. "Let me start by clarifying. My name is not Ann Peterson." She paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "My name is Isabella Rossi, and as of 3 months ago, I am the new Chief Executive Officer of Apex Air." If Chloe had been told the plane had just turned around and flown to the moon, she would have been less shocked. The words hung in the air of the sterile boardroom, rearranging everything Chloe thought she knew. CEO, the passenger from 34B, the woman who complained about the sparkling water, the woman whose face was still faintly flushed from the force of her hand, was the ultimate authority of the entire company. Chloe's mind went into freefall. This wasn't just a career-ending mistake anymore. This was a career-obliterating, history-making, legendary blunder. You slapped the CEO. It sounded like the setup to a terrible joke. Isabella Rossi watched the cascade of emotions on Chloe's face: disbelief, horror, a dawning, soul-crushing despair. She showed no reaction. She was all business. For the past month, Isabella continued her voice, as level as a cruise-controlled altitude. I have been flying incognito on our own routes, economy class, no special treatment. I've flown to Dallas, to Frankfurt, to San Francisco, and now to London. I've been calling myself Ann Peterson, a retired accountant. It has been illuminating. She leaned back in her chair, the picture of corporate power. I inherited a failing airline, Ms. Sterling, an airline that was once the pride of the industry, now a case study in mismanagement and decay. The balance sheets told me one story, a story of budget cuts, declining revenue, and terrible margins. But numbers don't tell you about the soul of a company. To understand that, you have to experience it firsthand. She gestured vaguely towards the window overlooking the airfield. I've seen it all. I've seen gate agents on the verge of tears from understaffing. I've seen pilots trying to make up time because of maintenance delays caused by a lack of spare parts. I've seen dirty cabins and broken tray tables. And I've seen flight attendants like you expected to be brand ambassadors for a brand that has given them almost nothing to be proud of. Chloe sat in stunned silence, her own personal grievances suddenly being echoed by the most powerful woman in the company. My Ann Peterson persona was designed for a purpose. Isabella went on, a clinical edge to her voice. She is everything a difficult passenger is demanding, condescending, and perpetually dissatisfied. I was stress-testing the system. I wanted to see where the breaking points were. I wanted to see how our frontline employees, our most valuable and most neglected assets, coped under the worst kind of pressure. She paused, her gaze sharpening as it fell on Chloe. And then I met you. Chloe braced herself. This was it. The final judgment. For 7 hours you were perfect, Isabella said, and the word perfect was so unexpected it made Chloe flinch. You handled my every ridiculous complaint with a professionalism that was frankly astounding given the circumstances. You were a model employee, but that wasn't the most impressive part. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes locking with Chloe's. The medical emergency. I watched you. I have the report from the cardiologist who was on board. He couldn't stop praising you. You were calm, efficient, and compassionate. You took command. You didn't just save a passenger's life, Ms. Sterling, you saved the airline from a multi-million-dollar lawsuit and a PR catastrophe. In that moment, you embodied everything Apex Air is supposed to be. Chloe's throat was dry. She couldn't form a response. This surreal pendulum swing from condemnation to praise was giving her vertigo. And then, Isabella said, her voice dropping slightly, I pushed you too far. She gestured to her own cheek. I said things that were deliberately cruel, personal. I wanted to find the absolute limit. I wanted to see what would happen when the perfect employee finally broke. And you did. Isabella stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the planes. The slap was unprofessional. It was unacceptable. By every rule in our corporate handbook, I should fire you on the spot, revoke your credentials, and ensure you never work in this industry again. That is what my predecessor would have done. That is what the board would expect me to do. She turned back to face Chloe. But I'm not going to do that. Chloe's head snapped up. Of all the things she had expected Isabella Rossi to say, that was not one of them. What? She whispered. The slap was a data point, Ms. Sterling. A very, very loud one, Isabella said. It told me more than 100 focus groups and 1,000 consultant reports ever could. It told me that our employees are at their breaking point, that their dedication is being repaid with so much stress and so little support that even the best of them like you can snap. The problem isn't a rogue flight attendant. The problem is a broken company. She walked back to the table and sat down, her entire demeanor changing. The cold, analytical CEO persona softened, replaced by something more direct, more human. I know who you are, Chloe. I had my team pull your file the moment we landed. 10 years of exemplary service. Not a single formal complaint against you. Dozens of commendations. I read about your father, Robert Sterling, a legend in our engineering department for 30 years. I read about his illness and the financial strain you're under. Tears welled in Chloe's eyes, not of fear this time, but of shock. This woman, this CEO, had seen her. Not just as an employee number, not just as an assailant, but as a person. What you did was wrong, Isabella stated, her voice firm again. But why you did it, that's the key. You didn't snap because you're a bad person or a bad employee. You snapped because you care. You were defending your profession, your pride, the legacy your father helped build. You were defending the soul of this company from what you perceived as an attack by an ignorant passenger. She steepled her fingers, and that Chloe Sterling is an asset I cannot afford to lose. Chloe stared, her mind reeling, unable to comprehend where this was going. I don't understand. I am putting together a new task force, Isabella explained, an operational reformation committee. Its sole purpose is to fix this airline from the inside out, to listen to the flight crews, the gate agents, the mechanics, and to rebuild our culture from the ground up, to make this an airline people are proud to work for again. It's not going to be run by executives in suits who haven't set foot on a commercial plane in years. It's going to be run by people who know the truth. She leaned across the table, her expression deadly serious. I'm not offering you your job back, Chloe. A return to the line is impossible after today. That chapter is closed. I'm offering you something else. She let the statement hang in the air for a beat. I want you to be my senior advisor on that committee. I want you to work directly with me. Your job will be to be the unfiltered, brutally honest voice of the frontline staff. I don't need another yes man. I have a building full of those. I need someone who knows what's broken because they've lived it. I need someone with the passion to save this airline and the guts to tell me when I'm wrong. She gave a small, wry smile and gestured to her cheek, and I have rather definitive proof that you're not afraid to do that. The offer hung in the silent boardroom like a challenge, a single impossible sentence that rearranged the laws of physics in Chloe's mind. She felt the crushing pressure of the deep sea and the weightlessness of space all at once. One reality, the one she had meticulously prepared for over the last 90 minutes of terror, was a landscape of shame, security escorts, legal proceedings, and a future defined by a single catastrophic mistake. The other reality was this, an offer so ludicrous, so completely detached from the rules of cause and effect that it felt like a hallucination brought on by extreme stress. Senior advisor to the CEO. The title was an alien configuration of words. Her brain tried to parse it, but it kept short-circuiting. The flight attendant in her, the one conditioned by years of strict hierarchy and procedural rigidity, screamed that this was a trap, a cruel, elaborate corporate maneuver she couldn't possibly comprehend, a way to publicly humiliate her before casting her aside. You can't be serious!" Chloe stammered the words, emerging hoarse and thin. It was all she could muster. "I slapped you. I assaulted a passenger. By every rule, Every line in the employee handbook I was forced to memorize. I should be in police custody right now. And if I were a CEO who managed by the handbook, you would be, Isabella replied, her voice unwavering. She didn't dismiss Chloe's shock. She acknowledged it, met it head-on. But the handbook is what got us into this mess. It's a document written by lawyers to protect the company from its employees, not to empower them. It creates a culture of fear, not a culture of excellence. I am interested in excellence. What you did was a failure of protocol, but it was born from a passion for the very excellence we've lost. Chloe's thoughts were a maelstrom. She looked at Isabella, truly looked at her, trying to find the angle. Was this a test? Another more sadistic level of the Ann Peterson experiment. Why me? She asked, her voice gaining a sliver of strength, fueled by disbelief. There are thousands of employees. You have union representatives, senior pursers, people who have been with the company since before I was born, people who haven't just committed assault. The union reps tell me what the union constitution requires them to. Isabella countered, ticking the points off on her fingers with clinical precision. They speak of contracts, not culture. The senior employees, the ones who have survived, have done so by becoming masters of quiet endurance. They've learned to absorb the dysfunction, to work around it, to never make waves. They are survivors, and I respect that, but I don't need a survivor. I need a catalyst. She leaned forward, her gaze pinning Chloe to her seat. You're different. You are, according to every metric in your file, a model employee who was pushed past the breaking point. You are a case study in what happens when we betray the trust of our best people. And most importantly, Chloe, you have absolutely nothing left to lose. An hour ago, you believed your career was over. That makes you uniquely, beautifully honest. You have no corporate ladder left to climb, so you have no reason to flatter me. You have no reputation left to protect, so you have no reason to lie. You are, for my purposes, the perfect instrument of truth. The cold, pragmatic logic of it was both terrifying and irrefutable. She had been chosen not in spite of her failure, but because of it. Her moment of ultimate weakness had become, in this strange new calculus, her greatest strength. What would I even do? Chloe asked the question, less about logistics, and more a desperate plea for a map of this new alien territory. I serve coffee and manage cabin safety. I don't know the first thing about boardrooms or operational reformation. You know everything that matters. Isabella insisted, a sudden fierce energy infusing her voice. You know the smell of the galley when the ovens are broken again. You know the look in a passenger's eyes when their flight has been delayed for the third time and the gate agent has no answers. You know what it feels like to have your pay cut while reading about executive bonuses in the newspaper. That is the knowledge that matters. That is the knowledge this headquarters has been willfully ignoring for 15 years. You will be my eyes and my ears, Isabella continued, laying out the vision. You'll fly our routes not as crew, but as an observer. You'll sit in the jump seat during takeoff and landing, listening to the crew's unvarnished conversations. You'll spend weeks at a time with the ground staff at our busiest hubs. You'll sit in on maintenance briefings and tell me if the mechanics feel they have the resources they need. Your office will be Gate C34 in Chicago, and the baggage claim in Dallas, and the crew lounge in Frankfurt. You will bring the truth of those places back to me, raw and unfiltered. She paused, letting the scope of it sink in. Your first official task will be to draft a proposal for a new crew dignity and passenger conduct protocol. It will outline, in no uncertain terms, what our employees are expected to endure and what they are not. It will create a clear, management-backed system for de-escalation, for issuing warnings to abusive passengers, and, if necessary, for barring them from our airline. You will take your worst experience and turn it into a shield to protect every other employee. You will start by fixing the problem that broke you. The offer was no longer just a job. It was a mission, a chance for redemption, not just for herself, but for everyone who felt as exhausted and undervalued as she did. It was a chance to fight back, not with a desperate, angry slap, but with policy, with authority, with the ear of the CEO. Chloe thought of David, his weary resignation. She thought of her father and the pride he had for a company that no longer existed. This was a chance to help rebuild it, to take the scattered broken pieces and forge them into something worthy of that pride once more. She took a deep breath, the first truly steady one since the call light chimed over seat 15C. The fear was still there, a cold knot of insecurity in her stomach, but for the first time it was overshadowed by a flicker of fierce, determined hope. She met Isabella Rossi's gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between the two women who had begun their day as adversaries. "Okay," Chloe said, her voice quiet but firm. "Okay, I'll do it." A genuine, brilliant smile lit up Isabella's face. "Good," she said simply. "My executive assistant Daniel will handle the onboarding. It will be a temporary 6-month contract to start with a salary that should alleviate your current financial pressures." The delicate phrasing was a clear and compassionate acknowledgement of Chloe's situation with her father. "Welcome to the other side of the curtain, Ms. Sterling." The first few weeks were a dizzying exercise in culture shock. Chloe traded her practical, comfortable uniform for corporate attire that felt like a costume. The Apex Air headquarters, a sleek tower of glass and steel she had only ever seen from the highway, was an alien ecosystem. The air hummed not with the roar of engines, but with the quiet, intense thrum of ambition and stress. People moved with a hurried, silent purpose, their faces illuminated by the glow of their smartphones. They spoke in a language of acronyms and buzzwords, synergy optimization deliverables that made her head spin. She was an anomaly, a ghost at the feast. The few executives Isabella introduced her to looked at her with a mixture of polite confusion and thinly veiled suspicion. Who was this former flight attendant who now had a desk just steps from the CEO's office? Her first report was a trial by fire. Isabella had sent her to spend a week at their JFK hub, simply observing. Chloe sat in crowded crew lounges, listening. She stood by the customer service desks, watching. She filled a notebook with the raw, unfiltered truth. She wrote about the broken luggage sizes, the perpetually out-of-order crew printers, the gate agents who hadn't had a new computer in 8 years and had to use their personal cell phones to get information. She wrote about the pervasive sense of cynicism, the gallows humor, the feeling that management saw them as a liability, not an asset. She wrote the report in her own words, simple and direct, as if she were explaining it to a new hire. She didn't use a single corporate buzzword. She ended it with a direct quote from a senior gate agent. "They want us to deliver a premium experience, but they give us broken tools and no support. It's like asking someone to bake a wedding cake with an easy-bake oven." She submitted it to Isabella with a knot of fear in her stomach, half expecting to be told it was unprofessional, that it needed to be sanitized for corporate consumption. 20 minutes later, Isabella called her into her office. She was holding the printed report. "This," Isabella said, her voice resonating with satisfaction, "is worth more than the $200,000 I paid consultants for a report that told me we needed to re-engage our core brand identity. This is real." From that moment on, their partnership solidified. Chloe became a conduit for the truth, and Isabella became the hammer that used that truth to forge change. Chloe's passenger protocol was met with stiff resistance from the legal and finance departments. Legal worried about lawsuits from banned passengers. Finance worried about the cost of diverting flights to offload someone. In a tense meeting, Chloe found her voice. The cost of one flight diversion is a fraction of the cost of replacing an entire crew that quits due to burnout and abuse. She argued, her voice shaking but clear. And the potential lawsuits from employees who feel unsafe and unsupported are a far greater risk. We have a duty of care to them too. Isabella backed her play without hesitation, and the protocol was pushed through. For the first time, a memo went out to all staff, not about cost-cutting, but about their right to a safe and respectful workplace. It was a seismic shift. The change in her own life was just as profound. With her new salary, she was able to move her father to a state-of-the-art care facility, one with bright, sunny rooms and a team of dedicated specialists. One afternoon, visiting him, she told him about her victory with the coffee budget, explaining how she'd argued that restoring the small perk of providing quality coffee wasn't about money, but about morale. Robert Sterling, on one of his more lucid days, listened intently. He looked at his daughter, seeing not the flight attendant he knew, but someone new, a leader. A system is only as strong as its most stressed component, he said, his voice a familiar raspy echo of the brilliant engineer he once was. It sounds like you're fixing the stress, Chloe. Tears pricked her eyes. I'm trying, Dad, she whispered. 6 months after that fateful flight to London, Chloe was walking through the main lobby of the Apex headquarters. Her initial contract had been made permanent, and she was now an established, if unconventional, part of Isabella's inner circle. She was heading to a meeting when she noticed something new against the far wall. A large, beautifully lit display case had been installed. Curious, she walked over. It was a tribute to the company's history, filled with vintage photos and memorabilia. Her eyes scanned the images, smiling flight attendants in pillbox hats, gleaming new planes on the tarmac, a ribbon cutting for a new terminal. And then in the very center, one photo made her stop dead. It was a black-and-white picture of a group of young, proud engineers standing in front of the massive engine of the first Boeing 747 Apex had ever purchased. In the front row, grinning, his hair slicked back, was a 20-something Robert Sterling. Her breath hitched. She leaned closer and saw a new gleaming brass plaque at the bottom of the display. It didn't mention profits or market share. It simply read, "Dedicated to the people who are the soul of this airline, past, present, and future." She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Isabella standing beside her, a quiet smile on her face. "A reminder," Isabella said softly, "of what we're fighting for." Chloe looked from the youthful, optimistic face of her father in the photograph to the determined, powerful face of the woman beside her. She thought of the journey, the exhaustion, the rage, the slap that should have been an end, but was instead a beginning. Her flight plan had been violently, terrifyingly diverted, but it had led her here. Home. The work was far from over, but for the first time in a very long time, Chloe Sterling felt she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The story of Chloe Sterling and Isabella Rossi isn't just about a slap heard around the world. It's a powerful reminder that behind every uniform, every name badge, and every corporate logo, there are human beings with breaking points. It's a story about how the worst moment of someone's life can become the catalyst for the greatest change, and how true leadership isn't about punishing failure, but about having the wisdom to understand its cause. Chloe's journey from the galley to the boardroom shows that sometimes the most disruptive voices are the ones we need to listen to the most. What do you think? Did Isabella make the right call, or should Chloe have been fired on the spot? Could a company really change this dramatically in real life? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes these stories come alive. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We have so many more incredible real-life dramas to share with you, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.